Well, good Monday morning to you. Welcome to our Monday morning live edition of the Doctor's Nutrition Show. I'm your host, Jim Tabor, along with Dr. Jim and Janine Fox of Doctor's Nutrition, located in Gulfport on Cal-and-Lorraine Road, just south of Pass Road. And we do this every Monday morning. It is a live call-in show, and what we do is we pick a topic and we ask you to call in and ask any questions you might have regarding that topic, if it refers to you. Our numbers are 896-0713 or 800-349-0713. You can pass the question along to our producer, and they will pass it along to us. So this morning we're talking about something that we've never talked about before.
I know.
In
I don't think
almost 10
so.
years that we've been doing this show.
If it was maybe a glancing blow, but it's never been
Right,
a direct
never talked
conversation.
to it specifically.
Yeah, we're talking about this morning endometriosis and fertility.
And it's actually National Endometriosis Month is why we picked the topic. Yeah, we were looking at what month is it and what health topics, is out in the news, and that's why we decided to do a show on it. And endometriosis itself affects many, many, many women.
Millions.
Yes,
What
it
exactly is it and what causes it?
Well, endometriosis is a growth of the tissue that normally lines the inside of the uterus. When it grows outside of the uterus, and it can get out into the abdominal cavity, things like ovaries, things like that, all around in there, around the bladder, so on and so forth. So it can cause a lot of problems.
It's an overgrowth
Yeah.
of the endometrium,
Right.
pretty much. And it also can be overgrown inside the uterus, outside the uterus, in the muscles. I mean, it can cause all kind of problems. And like I said, it's very, very common. And you asked what the cause is. The cause, they say unknown, but we know it is more of an estrogen dominance problem. And people are like, okay, what's estrogen dominance? I mean, most people don't really get what that is. It's when there's actually too much estrogen and not the opposing progesterone to keep it under control. Right. We live in an estrogenic society, and we've talked about that a lot. And of course, that can be a completely another show just talking about what in our environment is estrogenic, which is a lot, because we're seeing women getting more things like endometriosis and infertility problems, and men getting lower testosterone. And it's because our environment is full of estrogen.
A lot of the things that we talk about, the additives and things that are in food, for instance, it's really not food. It's additives, it's stuff. It's edible chemicals that they've put in foods. And almost all of them, we've talked about BPA, ad infinitum and so on, and there's literally hundreds, if not thousands. And when you get down into the science behind most of those things, the majority of them are estrogenic, meaning they have an estrogen-like appearance to the body and can
And a
cause
lot of them are what they call xenoestrogens, which are actually way more harmful than your normal estrogen as well. And your xenoestrogens can come from plastics, it can come from pesticides. And so there's a lot of things where you can get the estrogen, but when it comes down to it, is the hormones are normally not quite right, and that's why people tend to get the endometriosis.
What are there some signs of it? Early warning signs?
Believe it or not, it's kind of this is a scary statistic. I was reading just recently that it takes the average female, if she has signs and symptoms, which may be very vague. It could be something like bladder issues. It could be bowel issues like IBS, even sometimes is mislabeled and forgotten. Sometimes they say on the average it takes between 6 to 7 visits to different doctors to get a correct diagnosis of if it truly is endometriosis.
Wow.
And they actually say one of the biggest symptoms is actually cramping.
Yeah.
Having a really bad cycle.
Yeah.
And also painful intercourse is another one.
Yeah.
So the really bad cycle, they say actually as much as 60 to 80% of all women with pain that time of the month, it's probably endometriosis, at least a mild form of it. And you can actually have different degrees of endometriosis.
I was going to ask, are there different stages of endometriosis?
There's definitely different stages.
Yeah.
And you have the mild, which people have cramping, and it might not even affect fertility, and they can, go on and not really have to do a lot, although they'd be more comfortable if they did. But when you start getting to moderate severe, I mean, you can start actually getting that endometrium wrap around everything. I mean, strangle the gut. You can get it to affect the ovary. I mean, it starts getting around everything and affecting everything. So it can actually be very, very debilitating. So it can actually be a big problem. And with so many people having it, you don't hear it talked about much. You really don't. I mean, we see a lot of women with it because, of course, people come in and say, well, I have this, and this. I said, sounds like endometriosis to me. And to me, with what we do, doing natural medicine, you know what? We can just try some of the things to see if it works. That's kind of like a lot of our things. We don't have to do biopsies. We don't have to do all that stuff because it's not, we don't have to be invasive because what we use don't hurt you. And it's going to straighten out hormone problems either way. So that's kind of like what we do is just say, well, if it sounds like it, let's go ahead and see, because you can't tell from blood work. Blood work cannot tell if it's endometriosis.
And even if they do the hormones, and a lot of females come in and say, well, it's something hormonal, I need my hormones checked. Well, okay, fine, we'll do that. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily demonstrate endometriosis. It can demonstrate some hormones that are way off base, that's for sure. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily just delineate this is endometriosis.
Can an improper diet aggravate the issue?
Oh, definitely.
Well, think about, back to the food additives. When you look at the average food that's consumed in America, and probably we're exporting it, so it's going around the world. When you look at that and you see that the average food contains something like thousands of different chemicals and everything, notice what you're buying and thinking it's food, probably isn't. It's a food that's been adulterated, and it's got these chemicals in it. Go back a few years, and I know probably most of you don't remember this, but where you get your food counts a lot. Okay, and it came from China, but there was some baby formula that came to the United States, and one of the things they had, their milk was pretty low in protein, so they were making this formula. So what they do, they added something to it. What did they add to it? Melamine. Now melamine. Yeah, stuff you make your countertops out of, okay? They grind it up nice and powdery smooth. Right. And it killed a few people, but hey, the Chinese made some money off it. And so that's the kind of stuff he at least got a funny look on his face. But it's a fact. What you don't realize is there's a term for it called food fraud. And all this food fraud, in other words, it's not what you think it is, it's becoming a real problem, and we're consuming these things. We talked about the nanoplastics or nanoplastics. Okay, plastics are typically
why it's important
estrogens.
To get real food.
Real food, and locally.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
896-0713 or 800-349-0713. We're talking about endometriosis and how it affects fertility. We're going to take a break. It's 8 minutes after 9 o'clock, and we'll be right back. And welcome back. 10 minutes after 9 o'clock here on this Monday morning with the Monday Morning Live edition of the Doctor's Nutrition Show. Our phone lines are open at 896-0713 or 800-349-0713. Let's move into the effect that it has on fertility.
Well, first I want to talk about what we do for endometriosis.
Okay, all right.
What we do for endometriosis is there's a couple things we do. For one, we use some diet always. That's always first. And we tell people definitely if you're having a hormonal issue, which it is affected by hormones, you definitely want to stay off of dairy because even organic dairy has high hormones. And when you start getting more hormones, that's not really going to be beneficial for it. Gluten also isn't great for it because it's an inflammatory, and actually endometriosis is very inflammatory itself. So it's got a lot of inflammation that goes along with it, which is why people have so much problems and pain and things like that. So we use the DIM, diindolylmethane, and it comes from cruciferous vegetables, but it takes about 10 pounds of those vegetables a day to get enough of it to make a difference.
Or to make one capsule.
So we actually use DIM, and we've had some really good success with DIM. And we also, there's a lot of new research on something called SPM, special pro-resolving mediators. The SPMs are known to help with the inflammatory response. And there's specific research that's been done on endometriosis to show that the SPMs definitely play a role. If you look on the internet, you'll see where people use, turmeric and bromelain, and none of that hurts. There's no doubt, but it's anti-inflammatory. But SPM is, I think, far superior to that for the inflammation when it comes to endometriosis. So there's a lot of things you can do, and most of the time that's it. Now, we have the natural progesterone creams if we have to. It's not where we start. I'll always start with DIM and SPM.
Yeah, and that's back to your diet because the SPMs, if you think about it, that is a metabolite of your omega-3s.
Right.
And think fish oil. And again, we do a test called the omega check. And I have yet to see anybody that does that omega check that's not taking massive amounts, what they would think would be massive amounts of omega-3s that actually have enough omega-3 to offset, and that's the anti-inflammatory stuff. All of your omega-6s pretty much are pro-inflammatory. So that's why.
All right, we got a question from a viewer. What can help with short-term memory loss?
I would actually, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that helps with short-term memory.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we always say number one thing, find out if there's any underlying problems causing it.
Right.
So lab work is the best thing you can do. Because if you have a thyroid issue, it's going to make short-term memory loss. If you have an anemia, it's going to make memory loss. If you have a vitamin D deficiency or B12 deficiency, I mean, there's all these things that can affect it. But what we also tell people, okay, say all those are good and you just have the short-term memory loss. I always say CDP choline.
Yes.
Bacopa is another good one. And we actually have something called Brain Reset that has the Bacopa in it, but it also has the ginkgo in it. So those are probably the first things that we use for
it. It has the lion's mane too.
Which is also good for short-term memory.
There's a lot of really good research on lion's mane. Actually, when you look at that Brain Reset, it's got everything.
Yeah, the Brain Reset has a lot of stuff in it, but it does not have the CDP choline.
No.
And when it really starts coming to the way the brain functions, you got to have choline. And it is a specific choline that is patented. It's called Cognizin, is the actual raw material.
Yeah.
And that's the one that we have because it's where a lot of the research has been done. And I have a lot of people that tell me they can tell a difference pretty quickly that they're taking it. And they can tell a difference in that Brain Reset too. So those two things I'd start with.
Right, back to that, when we talk about choline, she mentioned choline, you got to have choline for the brain to function correctly. And if you look at a lot of the OTC or over-the-counter meds that people take daily, routinely, don't even think about it, just do it, they're pretty much anticholinergic, which means that's not good for your brain.
Right.
And so that's the thing. You think even a lot of your prescription medications are anticholinergics.
Right.
So
I always tell people, look at the medications you're taking, talk to your doctor, look them up, look them up. If they say they make memory loss, talk to your doctor about an alternative.
Yeah.
Because if you're having memory loss, you don't want to stay on something that may be causing it. So you always got to get rid of the cause first. If there is a known cause, you got to get rid of the cause. So do that first. But
yeah, it's not a simple, quick fix, typically.
No.
Yeah. All right. 896-0713 or 800-349-0713. It's about 14 minutes after 9 o'clock this morning, and we're talking about endometriosis and the effects it has on fertility.
Okay, now it definitely affects fertility because the endometriosis can get overgrown. You don't have good implantation of the egg because of the endometrium being overgrown. It can affect the tubes, and then you don't even get the egg, So there's a lot of things that it can do with fertility. Now, fertility itself, we do a lot with. I mean, we see a lot of people that come in with fertility issues. And, our first step when someone has fertility issues is lab work, because you do want to see if there's other factors affecting it. And, you question them about the endometriosis, you question them about PCOS. We see a lot of PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And when you really get to it, polycystic ovarian syndrome usually comes really from diet because it's a sugar handling problem, which we're seeing more and more and more people have. I think the statistics recently said as many as 88% of the people are what they call insulin resistant, which is one of the things that it makes is PCOS, which also makes fertility issues. The same thing, we use that DIM even for PCOS, and we have an amazing effect on fertility. We were using it like that way before the research ever came out that it helped it. Because we just found we were putting people on it to straighten out their hormones, and people that had tried to get pregnant for 20 years were popping up pregnant. And we talked to the guy that held the patent on DIM, and he laughed because he said, that's what we're doing research on now. You've just used it long enough to see it before it even came out. And I'm like, oh yeah, so we definitely, that DIM is unbelievable for fertility. And we've seen people that have went through time after time after time to fertility clinics and do all stuff, but you got to get back to fixing the hormones. A lot of times they just try to add a bunch of hormones, but not fix the person's own hormones. Right. Always better if you're going to fix your own hormones. It's always better if it's your own. And if it takes diet, and if it takes taking something like DIM and take something for inflammation, that's a lot easier to do. And so the way what we do is we go back to trying to make your body work properly and the way it should work. And that's kind of how we approach fertility and endometriosis and PCOS and all the different hormonal issues women can have.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
There's a lot to it.
A lot
But
to
we
it.
and thyroid plays a role too. We see people that come in and that's
Y'all are a lot to deal with.
yeah, I know.
Or y'all have a lot to deal with.
But we,
Let me
we,
rephrase
we
that.
do see a lot of fertility issues. And as, like I said, our environment affects more people, then we're going to see more fertility issues because that's one of the things it does. It
you can
messes
look
up
at-
the hormones.
There's really good statistics on how fertility has dropped over the years.
Yes.
You know, go back 50, 75 years, and you'll see that the fertility rate then versus now is a big difference. Big difference.
All right, 896-0713 or 800-349-0713. Our phone lines are open. If you have any questions regarding this morning's topic or anything regarding your health, give us a call. It's 18 minutes after 9 o'clock. We're going to take a break. We'll come back with this week's special. And welcome back. It's our final segment this morning. We're talking about endometriosis and the effect on fertility. And we have a question from a viewer that has nothing to do with either one of them. That's fine. That's what we're here for. We invite you to call in and ask any kind of health questions. But the question is, what can help if a person is anemic, but their iron is high?
Well, there's all kinds of anemias.
Right.
Not just an iron deficiency anemia. There's B12 anemias. There's all sorts of things. There's even you get involved in bone marrow just not producing the red blood cells. The kidneys not telling the bone marrow
Right.
to.
That's a big one that we see.
Yeah.
Where the kidneys don't tell the bone marrow to produce blood. So you have to look at all those. But then you also can get into, especially with the iron high, and if you're talking about the ferritin especially, inflammation will make your iron all go into storage and elevate the ferritin. And then the people will get anemic from that.
Right.
So that just takes more lab work. Bring us your lab work. We'll be happy to look at it, see what other issues there might be. But you got to look at more than an iron deficiency when there's an anemia, because there's a bunch of things that it can be.
All right.
There is.
Well, let's go ahead and take a look at what this week's special is from Doctor's Nutrition.
Yeah, it's the DIM, the DIM or diindolyl methane.
Yeah, DIM actually is good, like we talked about, for endometriosis. It's good for fertility, but it can be used by a lot of different people. It's not just for women either.
No,
men
men too.
use it for prostate issues.
Right.
Just so if you're out there watching and you wanted to try it, or looking at what the special is, it can be used by pretty much anything. We also use it in women as they age because it helps go through menopause easier. It helps after menopause because it helps with hormonal weight gain, hormonal hair loss. So DIM is used for so many different things. We actually just any hormonal issues you can use DIM.
Yeah, male or female.
Yeah, male or female.
Right,
And we have even a lot of bodybuilding things talk about using DIM to free the testosterone. So there are so many things you can use DIM. Now DIM works on the pathways of the estrogen. So it is not a hormone itself. It works on changing the hormones you have to make them more beneficial. And so that's one of the things that you want to do. I myself started DIM in my 20s, and I did have endometriosis when I was younger. Completely got rid of it.
Wow.
Completely. So the DIM, when I started, I probably started at about 23, 24. And I was not taking it for that reason. I was taking it for breast cancer prevention because that is huge research. That's when it came out. What it was initially researched for is ovarian and breast cancer prevention and prostate. So, the good thing is DIM has such good properties to it. And it's one of our biggest sellers. It really is, because it helps with so many hormonal issues. And when it comes, like I said, fertility, we see DIM do wonders with fertility. And then, like I said, we have a lot of other things we look at for that because it depends on the person. Everybody's different, and you got to look at your situation specifically and try to fix what your body has.
What kind of foods are good for fertility?
Well, real food.
Real, yeah.
Real food.
Non-sugar.
I know. You're right. Getting away from sugar.
Yeah, real
But
food.
Eating the fresh fruits and vegetables,
Yep.
locally grown as much as possible. Like I say, about the food for all thing, but you get as much of it locally as you can.
There's plenty of farmers markets around here.
Yeah.
Local farmers markets.
Be careful with farmers markets. I've actually seen at farmers markets somebody bring in a flat of like tomatoes from
Somewhere else.
God knows where else, and they weren't something locally. We do have some people that grow things locally.
But you want to
and
find
they-
out.
That's what you want to look for. You want to look for the guy or gal that's growing it in their
Ask.
backyard.
Just
You know,
ask.
right? Ask them; they'll tell you. And so that, and then when you start looking at the, overall food thing, a lot of your fatty fish, and you want the wild caught. You don't want farm raised salmon. I'm sorry, you just don't want it, and because Purina salmon chow is not
You don't
the same
want
as
farm raised any fish.
no.
No.
I mean, none of them. Tilapia is all farm
tilapia
raised.
is-
Yep.
Tilapia is all farm raised.
Yeah, so you don't want any of that. So really just go into a real food diet is one of the best things that you can do. And like I said, if you're having issues, come in, do the lab work, see if there's other things that are affecting it, because there's no doubt hormonal problems can come from another. Thyroid affects the hormone greatly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that affect each other. So we try to look at the whole person and try to get overall health, and that does make a difference.
Wow. I had sushi yesterday,
Okay.
which is, I guess, good. Except
Hopefully.
for the part of
Hopefully.
I'm not big on if it's raw, but
on the what?
not raw, but
Oh.
parasites are a big thing in raw food. It really is. And people don't really pay attention to that much.
Yeah.
But,
Kind of scary.
Well, shucks, America.
Yeah.
but
All
if it's
right.
cooked, it's good.
That's why you cook, right?
That's
Yeah.
why you cook. Yep.
Oh, and speaking of cooking, we've had this come up 1,000 times recently, and she and I were talking about it, especially over the weekend. Something we came up with looking at a recipe, and it's using olive oil, because everybody thinks, well, I'm cooking
Yes.
really healthy. I'm using olive oil. Well, if you're cooking at high temperatures and
Yeah,
it
that's
doesn't,
right.
it doesn't
Yeah.
take that high temperature.
And the bad thing is I went through so many recipes this weekend where they used olive oil and it was all above the 325 that you should cook olive oil at.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and like he said, it turns into trans fat. So it turns into something you don't want. So don't do olive oil. I will use olive oil if I'm cooking at like 275.
Right.
So if I'm cooking really low and know what the temperature is.
So what do you recommend if you're cooking really high?
Usually walnut oil or avocado oil.
Okay.
Because you can go high temperatures.
And you
on
have some of that
those,
at the store.
And they're still good oils.
yeah.
Yep.
And you know,
you
some
do
people
want-
use just a little bit of the coconut oil,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a saturated fat that is very stable, and most of your saturated fats are very stable, so you can use those. But you know, like olive oil's a great thing to use cold. If you look at most of your Mediterranean type diet, they drizzle it on their
yeah.
food cold.
Yeah, drizzle it on afterwards or put it on your salads. I mean,
Right.
olive oil is good, but you don't want to heat it over a certain 325. I mean, there's a few people that say 350. I say 325. I'd rather be safe and do it at a lower temperature.
They've actually shown some making of the
Yep.
trans fats down around that 300 mark.
Yeah, so
be careful.
I
Maybe we
usually
should do
go-
a cooking show one morning.
We might should because I do a
We
lot.
had a kitchen over here.
I
that we
do
used-
too much
Yeah, we-
cooking, but but there is a lot of things people don't know, and it actually can affect their health when they don't
And
know.
it does, just like this endometriosis thing
Yeah.
that we're talking about. If you do everything that's wrong dietarily, then yeah, you're going to wind up with things like the endometriosis.
And the good thing with the DIM is when you do take the DIM, and it does help, the cramping gets so much better or even gone. So that's actually a good thing.
All right, here we have a question regarding weight. How many calories should be eaten if your weight is 260 and you're above the age of 60?
It depends on how high you are. I'm talking about
Tall.
Tall,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we don't have much time left, and height makes a difference, and also activity level makes a difference. But I can just tell if you're 260, you got too much weight on you.
Yeah.
So give us a call at the store, and we'll be happy to help you there.
Yeah, they've got a great little diet.
yeah.
Yeah.
To,
Well,
to
and
go by
we'll-
to the
we'll-
low glycemic diet.
Right, and we'll explain that a calorie is not just a calorie.
Right.
Depends on where that calorie comes from.
Right. It does.
All right. Next week,
Next week we're going to talk about joints.
joints.
Everybody has. That's one thing that most people has as they age is actually arthritis, which is joint problems. But we're going to talk about other joint problems too. But we're going to talk about joints.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yep.
All right. Of course, you can find some more information. You can find a lot of the shows on YouTube. Go on to Doctors Nutrition's YouTube page and subscribe to that. It's growing quickly every day, as well as Facebook and the website. And we'll see you again next Monday morning here at 9 o'clock for another live edition of the Doctors Nutrition Show.
For more information on highlighting your business and services on Healthy Living South Mississippi, contact Jim Tabor at 896-1313.